Well, thanks, Matt. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elliot. I'm Elliot Harper. I'm a technical architect at a company called Cloud Kettle, who are a Salesforce partner based in Canada. I'm not based in Canada. I'm based in Orange, of all places, so flown in for this event tonight. A bit about me, I guess my 10-second bio. I've been using Marketing Cloud for quite a while now, for 10 years. And just recently, this month, been inducted into the Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame. So it's kind of a privilege to receive that award. And this evening, I'm going to be presenting Salesforce Data Cloud. This was originally intended to be a presentation for developers, but it's really evolved, I guess, into a presentation for architects, developers, and everyone else. In the session, I'll attempt to cut through the marketing messaging and explain what Salesforce Data Cloud actually is and why this is a game changer for Salesforce. So in our session, I'll be covering the following topics. But first, I want to start by explaining CDP. So can anyone here tell me what CDP stands for? Any guesses? Customer Data Platform, you're kind of correct, but I call it the Customer Data Problem. You see, due to, in part, the advancements and drop in storage costs, companies now have a gargantuan data sets at their disposal. So every time a customer goes and makes a purchase, opens an email, or simply views a web page, these engagement events can be captured and stored, which, if you can organize this data properly, enables you to understand your customers, predict their needs, personalize their interactions, and much more. The challenge, however, is making this data actionable. So when a customer installs an app on their, say, their mobile device, or maybe a prospect adds a product to their e-commerce cart, but then promptly leaves the website, when these types of events occur, it's often an optimal time to engage them and direct them towards an outcome, like sending them an email or perhaps an SMS message. And this data, which is coming from all over the place, needs to be organized and actionable in real time, not just 24 hours later. And if you can master this, then the opportunities to create value from customer data for both businesses and customers are enormous. The other problem we have is consent. So the customer is now in control of their data and how you use it. You see, the regulatory landscape is on the move. And what started out a few years ago with a GDPR in Europe is now rippling across continents. Recently, we've seen the CCPA in California, the LGPD in Brazil, and then there's India's upcoming Personal Data Protection Bill, or PDPP, tongue twister, which is said to be one of the most strictest and comprehensive data privacy laws globally. And this is just the beginning. We should anticipate similar regulations to be popping up for years to come. So while all of these current and emerging data protection regulations vary, they all share one common trait, and that's to give individuals control over their personal data, while also requiring organizations to establish a legal basis for processing that data. You see, you just can't store data because it might be useful to someone one day. Rather, you need to determine why you need to store the data and identify if there are any regulatory or legal requirements for retaining it. The other problem we have is the marketing funnel. See, the customer is now in control of the marketing funnel. So this classic cone-shaped marketing funnel we see here is one key objective, and that's to get your audience from a prospect down to a customer. And it works, as you probably know, by filling up as many leads as possible and hoping for the best as they squeeze through and drop out the bottom as a new customer. But the funnel has changed. We still have all the same stages, but they don't look like they used to. Instead of the traditional cone shape, it now more resembles this sideways hourglass that we see here. And that's because seeing digital technology and mobile devices have put consumers back in control. So someone who's looking for, say, financial services, for example, might be looking for a mortgage or pension, might start by checking comparison sites, read customer reviews, and then narrow their search before making their purchasing decision. And even once they purchased, they might then go and share their experience with friends on social media. But marketers still need to generate leads and nurture interest and desire and action, but not necessarily in that order, and definitely not using the same tactics. So the traditional segmentation approach simply doesn't fit anymore, as leads can enter the funnel at any stage. So audiences need to be highly pliable. And segmentation. So you still need to segment your data into identifiable and addressable audiences. So many marketers typically enlist the help of their IT team to build complex segmentation models using SQL, where a database administrator can literally go wild and knock themselves out. I mean, it really is a very extensive declarative language, but it's not the language of marketers. It's a specialist discipline that not only requires familiarity with the language vocabulary, but also knowledge of the optimized database design and design query patterns. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, this data needs to be updated and accessible in real time. Does that sound reasonable? Well, you just ask your IT team for all that and let me know how you get on. And to compound this, we've got siloed data. So while this customer and behavioral data exists, it's very fragmented. And the systems that manage the data are actually built for a different era. We've got customer data residing in CRM, transactional data somewhere else, web data in another system, and so on. And the number of data sources is on the rise. So the average number of data sources used by marketers in 2010 was 6, which is forecast to almost double this year, by the end of the year, to 18, according to the latest Salesforce State of Marketing report. And this comes at the same time when multiple studies show that marketers are losing faith in their data. And to compound the problem further, disparate platforms contain a rich source of customer and behavioral data, which is all very nice, but it's not actionable. So until you're able to integrate all your data sources, you can't act on that data. So like you can't go and send a welcome email to new customers or nurture website visitors who have completed a form until you start to connect all these data sources together. And integrating these disparate data sources is just hard. I mean, a recent study by MuleSoft reveals that the vast majority, that's 87% of organizations, find that integration issues are a hindrance and slow down their digital transformation initiatives. So let's next one. You want to click next? There we are. Yeah, keep on going. Sorry, we've got to catch up on this side. There we go, integration. And next. So, and Salesforce, apologies for the Salesforce employees in the room, but I guess it's no surprise to them and us that they have their own set of challenges. So like some other SaaS vendors, a core challenge for Salesforce is the success of their own platform, which was created more than 20 years ago and was really designed for a different era and runs on a competitor's platform. So in 2013, and this is all public information, Salesforce started the Sayonara project, and apologies for anyone who's Japanese or speaks Japanese in the audience, but Sayonara is goodbye in Japanese. So this project was to move off their Oracle-centric infrastructure to a more modern and open platform. But really not much progress has happened since then. Another challenge that Salesforce has had is also big data. It's specifically its database and platform architecture doesn't handle voluminous or big data well. So, while you can technically store, say, 50 million records in Salesforce core objects, storage costs are not only prohibitive, as 50 million rows equates to at least 100 gigabytes of data, I do the math, but you'll also quickly run into issues when processing that data at scale due to what are called apex governor limits that strictly enforce limits so that processors don't monopolize shared resources in the multi-tenant environment. And for those architects in the room, I hear you already arguing, well, what about external objects? Well, I mean, governor limits apply to external objects too, which include things like a maximum of 4 joins across standard and external objects, and you can only retrieve or create 50,000 rows an hour, just to mention just a few. You just can't process big data in Salesforce. That's a fact. And I'd say the third challenge that Salesforce has had is that they've been on this big acquisition shopping spree for almost 20 years. But remember that platforms they've acquired like Pardot and ExactTarget, now Marketing Cloud, Demandware, Tableau, Slack, and others are built on different technology stack with different architecture and different data models. And the reality of seamless data integration is, well, not seamless. So, these three key challenges, among many others, raise the question, now, how are Salesforce going to create a next generation platform that will secure them another 20 years of lifespan? Well, what's that answer? Well, I'll come to that later. But before I do, I firstly want to paint a quick picture and take you on a history tour of Salesforce's journey so far that I've put together. So the first step in their, let's call it their CDP journey, started way back in 2013, even before CDP was invented. You see, at that time, they released Journey Builder and Contact Builder. And Contact Builder actually bears all the hallmarks of a CDP. And think about it. So it enables you to go and build cardinal relationships between different data sets completely declaratively. You can organize and tag data sources, admittedly a feature which no one uses, but you still have the ability to go and group your data sets into sources. And it attempts to provide a single customer view where you can actually drill down, pull up a contact record and see all of the attributes associated with that contact and all of the journeys and emails they've received. And fast forward, I guess the next phase in the timeline is in the Spring 18 release. We saw the introduction of the individual object. And since then, Salesforce has quietly phased in new storage objects that have come together to form a comprehensive canonical data model to manage all the different aspects of an individual's consent. Also in 2018, at Dreamforce 2018, Salesforce announced something called Customer 360. This has evolved into other things that we'll talk about shortly, but the idea of Customer 360 was to pull in data from different consumer-orientated sales products like Sales Cloud and Commerce Cloud and even Marketing Cloud, and map them together from the different system identifiers or system record and field mapping. And then the following year, in 2019, we saw the next evolution of Customer 360, and that was a CDP platform, which was first announced 5 years ago. Which was, there's a story behind this, which I won't bore you with, but it was shortly renamed to Customer 360 Audiences. And then we saw Customer 360, which was originally announced in Dreamforce, changed to Customer 360 Data Manager. And since then, we've seen a few more name changes. So Customer 360 Audiences became Salesforce CDP, which then briefly became Salesforce Genie at Dreamforce, and is now referred to as Salesforce Data Cloud. So that's the story so far. But I know you're probably all asking, I still don't understand what Data Cloud actually is. So again, I'm coming to that. But before I do, I want to firstly explain what CDP is. And there's actually an awful lot of ambiguity on what a CDP is. And that's because many different vendors are out there, I think 76, all coming up with their own terms and explanations. But at the risk of a massive oversimplification, a CDP, or Customer Data Platform, is a database for marketers. Specifically, it's a purpose-built, self-service database where marketers can ingest siloed customer data, build unified customer data profiles, and make these profiles actionable to any engagement platform. For example, like Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So let's unpack that a bit further with the help of this. This is the only Salesforce slide that you'll see in this presentation, but the Salesforce marketing slide. But I think it's helpful to kind of understand the anatomy of a CDP. And there are essentially 5 pillars, or Vs, as Salesforce call them, in Salesforce CDP, which is now Salesforce Data Cloud architecture, which include velocity. So that refers to the ability to import enterprise and file-based data at scale with streaming and batch ingestion services. Next, we have variety in the second swim lane. So this refers to the process of transforming, cleansing, and harmonizing data into a unified model. Next, wait for it, veracity. Yes, that is a word. I had to look it up in the dictionary. But remember, it has to start with V, because I did say 5 Vs. If you check, it says it means accuracy. And this refers to a system of truth through customer resolution, cross-device identity management, and data governance tools. Next, we have volume, which refers to storing data. And we're talking big data, we're talking, in the case of Salesforce Data Cloud, 50 billion profiles per tenant, and at a petabyte scale analytics environment. Petabytes, it's a very big number. I think there are 1,024 terabytes in a petabyte. And finally, we have data value. So all of this data can then be actioned across multiple services like Marketing Cloud, advertising audiences through Ad Studio, Marketing Cloud personalization or Interaction Studio for real-time interaction management on your website, analytics, and more through external integrations. Okay, I'll kind of get that, right? So how on earth is this a game changer then for Salesforce? Well, I'd say there are 3 main things here for Salesforce. Firstly, ingestion. So, well, on the core platform, you have been able to ingest fairly large data sets through the Salesforce bulk API, where you can upload 50 million records at a time every 24 hours with a maximum of 10 megabytes per data file. Data Cloud take this to a completely new level, where you can ingest up to 500,000 records per second, right? And a cap of not 10 megabytes, 10 gigabytes per CSV file. Oh, and of course, it's got native connectors to ingest files from Amazon S3 and Google Cloud Platform. So the next game-changing thing for Salesforce is storage. So Data Cloud uses not S-objects, but a data lakehouse to store all this normalized data at scale, where billions of records can not only be stored, but also queried in milliseconds. And thirdly, it provides a unified data model. So for a long time, we've seen a lot of redundancies and also duplications across Salesforce data models. For example, if you've got S objects, standard objects in core, and you want to, or Salesforce objects, and you want to bring them across to Marketing Cloud, you have synchronized data extensions, and the term is somewhat misleading, essentially cloning those object records in data extension Marketing Cloud. So we've got this big duplication problem, and this accumulates over time and across different platforms through their acquisitions. But now there's one single unified model with one place and one process for identity resolution to occur. Okay, so you get that, right? But what makes Data Cloud different from a CDP? Isn't this what CDPs do? Well, that's a great question. And there are, I'd say, a few differences to note. So the first is that Data Cloud is not just for marketing automation use cases. What else? I mean, sales automation. Think sales automation. So with Data Cloud, not only can activate audiences in Ad Studio and Marketing Cloud or Marketing Cloud personalization for web interactions, but also you can use it to create marketing qualified leads or sales qualified leads in Sales Cloud. So maybe when an individual falls into a segment, then they can create a lead automatically and pre-qualify them for a salesperson to follow up, or maybe convert leads to contacts based on their behavior. And also surface data in CRM to perform things like searching across different contact points for given profiles, tracking or tracing data lineage back to a contact point, and view aggregated engagement history from calculated insights. So all of this requires a lot of heavy data processing, which traditionally has been hindered through Salesforce reports and been limitations around that. Okay, so we've talked about sales automation and sales integration. What else can it do that a CDP can't? Well, the next is analytics. And of course, With Data Armor and Tableau, you can now unlock deep analytic audience insights using pre-built Data Armor dashboards and native connectivity with Tableau. Other CDP platforms would rely on a visualization layer like Looker to surface that data. And then finally, let's not forget consent. So as I mentioned earlier, Salesforce has actually been working on consent for some time. And Data Cloud is designed with consent and privacy in mind. So the Salesforce consent object model is embedded into the design and architecture of Data Cloud. So what we get as a result of that is privacy becomes an integral component of the data model without diminishing functionality. So rather than waiting for privacy risks to occur, it prevents them from occurring in the first place, as it provides an organized and standardized set of objects that align tightly to the properties of real-world entities. But what does all this actually mean? Well, I guess put simply, Data Cloud identifies who provided consent, which channels they actually consented to being contacted on, via which channel address, and more importantly, what type of content they actually consented to. So due to largely AV limitations, let's say in this hybrid multi-interstate event, I can't and won't bore you with a demo of Data Cloud. I will give you a kind of a quick overview of the key functionality just by looking at these tabs here we see on the platform. So on the first tab we see at the top is data streams. So data streams in Data Cloud refer to the connected data sources added to your Data Cloud instance. They might be, again, pulling data from Sales Cloud or Marketing Cloud. Next, we've got Data Explorer and Profile Explorer. These provide data visualization tools which gives you a view to the ingested data and the unified profiles that the platform's building. We have identity resolution. This is where you go and configure and match reconciliation rules to unify individual records, and it uses a process of deterministic and probabilistic matching to provide a persistent profile that maps multiple child identities to a single unified profile. We also have calculated insights that these are predefined calculated metrics that we use to build segments. And off the More tab, we have segments where users go and query all of the data in the system and create granular segments of customers to understand their composition. And finally, marketers can go and use activation targets and activations to manage where the segments are exported, like they go to Marketing Cloud or could trigger a flow in Sales Cloud. Now I want to look at the architecture and look under the hood, particularly at the infrastructure architecture, as this isn't a slide that you wouldn't see in any Salesforce help documentation, but I think it's helpful certainly for the architects in the room, and again, this is a presentation for everyone, just to understand how well considered and durable the platform architecture actually is, which would make any enterprise architect tonight drool. So Data Cloud is actually built natively on AWS, that's Amazon Web Services microservices. And this is a very high-level diagram, but we start with storage down the bottom. This comprises of a hot store running on DynamoDB, which enables data to be supplied very fast, like milliseconds. S3 for cold data. And there's an SQL metadata store for storing all the associated metadata. Next, we've got data processing or big data processing, where you're using Amazon EMR, which is Elastic MapReduce. And this is an industry-leading big data solution for petabyte data scale processing. And in the case of Data Cloud, this is for segmentation and activation. And for any hardcore AWS fans in the room, they're using Airflow as a workflow engine, Presto and Spark for querying and data processing on ORC files. ORC is a highly efficient column-based storage file format that's used for storing Apache Hive data. The platform compute runs as Kubernetes containers on EKS, that's Elastic Kubernetes Service. And then we've got Amazon SQS or Simple Queue Service. They're using that as the messaging framework with Apache Kafka as a distributed event store and stream processing platform. And then finally, on the right-hand side on activation, which I must hasten to add is traditionally a challenge to perform in traditional architectures at scale. They're using Amazon Elastic MapReduce with Spot instances for using what are called job as a service to auto-scale hundreds of clusters, complete with capacity routing and failure isolation. So it's a very elegant architecture. And on top of all of this, at the top, all the microservices are overlaid with a lightning-based control and management plane for the user interface. So quite a departure from the traditional architecture. So now let me explain some important data model concepts in the platform that are unique to Data Cloud. And I won't attempt to go and teach you everything there is to know about Data Cloud in this session. To do so would take 25 hours, but I think that it's important to understand these kind of three core concepts. And the first is what are called DSOs, or data storage objects. So in Data Cloud, these are data sources that are brought in, like a Marketing Cloud data extension, or perhaps a Sales Cloud object. And it could also be API ingestion. So these data streams can either be based on a batch data or can even be real-time data streams in some instances. Next, we have this notion of DLOs, or data lake objects. So this is a grouping of data created from data source objects. And thirdly, we have a notion of data model objects, which is probably the most important to understand, and the biggest paradigm shift for Salesforce, as they form the core data model. And think of them as some harmonized group of data from DSOs, from data storage objects, where they prevent both the physical and virtual views of data lake objects. So DMOs, they can either be standard, that out of the box, they've got many standard DSOs, or custom based on your business need. But the important thing, and that the big shift here, is the DMOs reside off core in the Data Cloud Lakehouse, not in S objects in core. So while you can run core in Data Cloud on your Data Cloud home org, that is, Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, S objects reside in a completely different database. There are efficiencies in them running them locally and in Data Cloud on the same tenant, but yeah, again, it's separate from the data lakehouse. And on DMOs, there are 72 standard DMOs in Data Cloud today that manage all the different aspects of relationships and attributes for different what are called subject areas, which include things like consent and loyalty and products and orders and marketing engagement data and much more. Just to kind of give you a glance of what those look like, I'm not going to explain this in detail, but here's an ERD, or entity relationship diagram, of one group of privacy-related DMOs and their relationships. And again, this is just kind of one of 72. So you can see how all those different sources map together. And here's just another snapshot of an ERD for engagement-related DMOs. As you can see, these are really carefully considered, highly canonical data models. So then finally, for all our developers in the room, how can you integrate with Data Cloud? Well, Data Cloud provides programmatic access to the platform through using a series of simple, robust, and secure RESTful APIs. And it also allows seamless integration for web and mobile applications using a series of Data Cloud SDKs. But let's focus on the APIs. So the APIs can be broadly categorized into 5 different APIs, which include the metadata API. So this is for doing things like retrieving metadata for all entities, like calculated insights and engagement profile, and other entities, as well as their relationships to other objects. Next, we have a calculated insights API, where you can retrieve all the metadata related to calculated insights generated by the platform. And you can go and slice and dice and filter insights through by selecting different dimensions and measures and filters in milliseconds. So very low latency APIs. Query APIs for high volume data reads and things like external application integration, or maybe you want to interactive query it on demand, or query the data lake on demand. And then we have the ingestion API, which enables you to ingest records either in a streaming pattern, say for incremental updates, or as a bulk, as I mentioned before, where we can periodically batch process massive CSV files of 10 gigabytes. And then finally, we have a profile API, where we can retrieve metadata and DMOs based on search filters. And all these 5 APIs come in 2 flavors. You've got something called direct APIs and connect APIs. So direct APIs is what, for external platform integrations, you'd most likely use. And they offer the most more optimal performance. However, connect APIs enable you to, they're identical, by the way, in structure, but they enable you to call directly from Apex or flows in Sales or Service Cloud without using HTTP callouts. So to learn more about these APIs, you can head over to GitHub on the Salesforce GitHub developers GitHub collection. There's also a Salesforce developers Postman collection. So you can go to postman.com and go and search with there, which provides, actually, they've really well documented each of those API routes. So bringing it all together then, and kind of wrapping up in 45 minutes, hopefully I've been able to, if you take away 4 things tonight, or today, depending on where the world you are located, it should be these 4 things. So firstly, don't get me wrong, Data Cloud is a game changer for Salesforce. And it's a game changer because it breaks the paradigms associated with storing and processing big data, while also addressing the integration challenges that we've seen historically across the entire Salesforce product line. Also, Data Cloud this is not marketing hype. It's not just, oh, this is another name for a CDP. It's more than a CDP. I mean, the CDP market is already well established. And if they wanted a CDP, then they'd have just bought one on their acquisition shopping spree. I know they evaluated all 76 vendors at the time. Remember that many of these CDP vendors have pivoted out of other industries like tag management, for example. So we see companies on platforms like Telium and Segment and mParticle who have a history in tag management. And they've all adapted their platforms to offer CDP-like functionality. But Data Cloud is different. It's engineered from the ground up and fulfills much more than just marketing automation use cases. Like I said, sales automation and consent and deep analytics. And this is really what makes Data Cloud stand apart from the other CDP vendors. And look, this is just the beginning. So, while Salesforce, and again, I don't work for Salesforce, so I'm going to bag them now saying they're touting this to be a real-time hyperscale data platform, which sounds very impressive and exciting. It's, let's say, more of a ambition statement today. So the fact is that today, Calculate Insights, for example, refresh every 4 hours, segments refresh every 4 hours, data extensions from Marketing Cloud ingested every 24 hours. There are certainly real-time components in the architecture, like streaming ingestion, but there's more work to be done. These gaps are certainly closing up to near time, and in time they'll be real time. But the platform has an aggressive roadmap ahead. I know this is a very important strategic direction for Salesforce, and I often joke, if anyone can make it work, Salesforce can. Data Cloud, as we see here, it's a very well considered and next generation architecture for Salesforce that's going to support them well into the future. And this is the future. I imagine a future where we can expect to see marketing and sales and service and commerce all seamlessly integrating together in a single unified Salesforce platform rather than separate isolated platforms. And that the reality is that hasn't been the reality until now. And Data Cloud is really going to be the conduit to enable Salesforce to deliver this next generation enterprise platform architecture. So thank you. I hope you now have a clear understanding of the platform, its evolution, and the potential future, certainly as I see it. And I'm going to hand back to Matt, who's going to open the floor and online, I think, to take questions from our panel.
Awesome, Elliot. I think a bit of a round of applause. You've gone for 45 minutes straight. There was a question from online, and they said, that's fine, Elliot, 25 hours, we'll sit and listen to you. I think everyone really got something out of that. I certainly did. It was really good. Hey, we've got questions and answers. Alana and Vlad, do you want to come down? Because you're going to help answer some of these questions. We'll organise another chair. And in Sydney, Arthur and Justin, are you there to help Elliot?
Who's helping me?
Your helpers.
Right, okay.
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure if they're in the room with you.
They are. Yeah. Sorry.
Fantastic. And we have a whole lot of questions here, so I might get the lad to read these out, and he might have some of these questions first.
No pressure.
And then open it to the floor to go through them. But please, there's going to be questions that we've got online. So we've got about 100 people online. There's questions in this room, I know. So we'll go through these questions and then we'll do the questions. So let go.
Sounds good. So is that the start? Yeah. All right. The first one is correct. Any organization says we have CDP implementation, doesn't that mean that they just do Salesforce Marketing Cloud implementation? So I should.
If you can
Oh, yeah.
Take that.
I know the answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'll try it. So no, I think it's on the contrary, and with some of the recent announcements, specifically around Data Cloud, CDP implementations, or rather Data Cloud implementations, are absolutely don't have to be associated with marketing only. So as Elliot said at the start of the presentation, the big opportunity for Salesforce is to open up the data domain to broader kind of use cases, or you look at that technology now just really building up the data layer for the enterprise and for the customers. So therefore, marketing that, but it doesn't have to be, and it's not necessarily going to be an integral part as it used to be in the past. Do you guys want to add anything to that? Right?
That's perfect.
All right. No, I'll just tell me. Next, right. Yeah. So, will it be possible to use data actions with calculated insights? So segments. Now it only works with streaming insights or streaming API, isn't it? So I guess it's a bit more technical question, but when you think about what you can do, so once the data makes a platform and you kind of harmonize it, unify it, the next set of actions you look into that, you use it for segmentation, and you start thinking about what can you do. So as Elliot was alluding to that, there are some components of the platform that are more real-time today, and others that are a bit more on the more traditional marketing space, where you've got a schedule and you run it and you refresh that. So depending on the based on the functionality, like where you find yourself working with, if you responding to the streaming data, which is coming up into real time into the platform, you can take more real time actions. If you're looking into taking a bit more of a scheduled approach, where you want to set up a specific schedule and run with it, then it's a bit different. Going forward, as Elliot said, we certainly looking into changing and extending and I guess enhancing the timings for majority of the capabilities to become more real time. But for now, I guess it really depends on where you are and what you do. You want to consider what options and actions can you take in real time versus you have to take with a bit of a schedule and
The next question.
Maybe we would like to add something related to the first question regarding data cloud, if it's only for marketing cloud or not. I think like Salesforce changed the name from CDP to data cloud also for pricing and packaging reason. In fact, data cloud will come in 4 different packages. We will have data cloud for marketing cloud, blank data cloud for health cloud, and a data cloud for Tableau. And it's mean that based on what the customer wants to specialize on, you will have a specific template of data cloud where you can leverage more quickly the benefits of the platform. This is something that would be interesting to be added, I guess.
Sure.
I was going to say that next question is very much the same about the real time. So how real time is CDP? Alana, you know the answer to that.
I know some of the data streams can be in real time, or they can be scheduled. I think the marketing cloud is, as I said, every day, every 24 hours. With the other ones can be in a bit more time, but I'm not sure exactly what's the speed.
I guess the question is how real time is it? In real time or is it so is there a slight delay?
Yeah. Maybe there is something that is quite interesting. There is two types of ingestion. You have like the batch ingestion that will be a scheduled ingestion, so every hour, 2 hours, and you also what you call streaming ingestion. That is the real time. It's like when you are watching a movie in streaming, for example, keep receiving data in your system. So I think that's that are interesting to know.
And also, from memory, I think S3 and GCP, it can be sequences every hour. And that's the maximum shortest cadence.
Yeah, they're actually going up in the hour. There's a difference between when you look into that, the batch essentially route that unifies all the data that comes on the schedule. The system does ingestion every hour, and different systems that we have native connected to, they kind of expose the data through the different time zones. So Marketing Cloud was slightly more delayed to expose the data. So the route we take is we extract the data from Marketing Cloud, then we ingest it into CDP. Or now Data Cloud. With some of the changes that we're looking into enhancing the platform, and it took us a while to kind of figure out the bits that need improvement in order to be looking into having the ability to do both routes more like 1 hour timings. So you will see that segments that we're publishing 24 hours changed to 4 hours. Now we're going to look into getting them to every hour published. So that will become more and more orchestratable in the sense of if you think about the flow where you bring the data from Marketing Cloud, you're using it for, I guess, smarts within the Data Cloud. So you unify it, nicely connect with other data sources, and then you want to take an action on that. And realistically, if you want to publish it in 1 hour time frame, it makes perfect sense because you can straight downstream activity Marketing Cloud. If you think about activation through Automation Studio, you need to add additional data and whatnot. So there is certain dependencies within the flow when you look at that from the inside. I'm not just looking at the capability to do it in real time. The real-time processor that kind of caters for ingestion API, web SDK, and the other things that we have played, they are different because we're doing ingestion for different types of data within the CDP layer, in the dot layer. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the whole thing. You will find 3 categories of data, and that's something that we look at from different angles. One of them is representing people, and so everything to do with individuals, and then attributes. So that's something that we try to, I think, adhere to every 2 minutes on ingestion. So the system will accept the payload much faster because, as Ilya said, it's designed to be highly scalable. But in order for us to process and ingest and surface the data in the platform, so you can do something that it takes a little bit of time. So that's why the next point is it real time? Is it real time? I think it's more reasonable to say it's near real time. But if you think about profile ingest taking it somewhere from 0 to 2 minutes. I think it's a reasonable time given the amount of processing we do behind the scenes, kind of bringing it into the platform so you can consume it. With regards to out actions, anything to do with what people do real time, majority of the use cases are focused on this change. We're looking into integrating directly into the marketing cloud. So if you think about engagement, you have a customer who's registering on the website, and you want to react on that information and try to get people ingested into their journey. That's one effectively outbound activity that we'll look for. Second real time is really doing the directly to sales and service platforms, into the core. Ability to expose the event into the flow and then orchestrate whatever actions you want to do. That's essentially the second big piece. The third way that we allow data for is for the webhooks. If you have other systems that need to be informed because the data platform receives a payload and we want to propagate the second event, but you have access to the data payload and you can share it. That's the distribution through the webhook. That's really number three.
Hey Vlad, it's Austin here in Sydney. Sorry to interrupt you, mate. We've just had a few people on the comments say there's an echo. I'm not sure if it's from our end.
From the Melbourne end, and then saying
Sorry.
It's I'll go on mute just when you want.
Yeah, apologies. I think we've got a couple of microphones here as well, but
now we can't hear you.
There you go. See.
You asked for
Okay.
the echo to go.
But don't worry, Vlad. In Sydney, we heard you loud and clear. It's unfortunately just the people online. So sorry,
Okay.
everyone online.
Yeah, well, hopefully it kind of makes sense. So yeah, like there is different sort of real-time components to that, but take on that on the ingest, there is near real-time, probably more to say that. On the action and outbound activities, you get more propagating, we triggering and exposing event. So it's a bit easier for us to orchestrate and say, hey, here's the data, we kind of already have it in place. And therefore, kind of like comparing to the point where we understand and kind of took the signal that something happened and telling other platforms that it happened, there's a difference in the way we process that. So that's probably.
I just a reflection on Elliot's comments, and also there is a data model that and Elliot mentioned there's 26 different views or so. There is a data model that and you mentioned different types of events. I mentioned back into the data model differently. So I guess data model and finding what events run through the platform quicker. You mentioned that there's different types of
Categories, yeah, that's right. I mean, the data model is a bit filtered on the stream because really for us is important to understand, I guess, the of data that you bring into the platform. So, like we thought about that. And I mean, traditionally, historically, Salesforce was structuring data models around people and individuals. And customer data platform will really enhance that with the fact that we categorize that, there's a category that sort of tells us if you bring up data about people, we want to flag it that way. And it's really baked into the platform when it comes down to resolving people. That was the big aim for the resolution engine, to ensure that we can take profiles of the same individual and kind of recognize the same person behind the scenes. So that helps us to drive that. Then the second piece of the data puzzle is understanding that actions and activities that people take. So if you're browsing through the website, if you're making appointments to see a dentist, if you taking the car for the test, it doesn't matter. But it's an action that is taken by a human individual, and therefore this is everything to do with engagement, and we categorize it as such. So people taking actions, and then the third piece of the puzzle is really anything I call auxiliary. We call it other. It's all about like all of the other things. So if you think about product catalogs, if you think about additional supplemental information that's not related to the person or their activity, and basically everything else. It does have an impact from a storage perspective. It does have an impact from a billing perspective. It does have, I guess, processing point of view, because there is a difference between segmenting people. There's a difference between traversing the activities for a period of time. And then how do you actually expose and make sure that the system is scalable and capable? Because we're not talking about millions of rows, about the petabytes of data. That's a very, very different scale. And therefore, from the platform standpoint of view, as I said, it's built up pretty much into technology to ensure that we provide scale, doesn't matter how much data you bring into the platform. That's why it's so crucial for us to have that. I guess there's one of the things, and I know we talked with Elliot about that, is model is not a physical object. And that's one of the interesting things about that. And it hopefully a bit of an understanding of speed and performance. Model is an API layer that translates and tells system how to data. So when you bring up 50 different data sources and connect them to the exact same data model object, we're effectively telling the platform how to traverse that is stored in the lake for representing that as that particular model object. And that really highlights, because we traditionally think, well, take an object and query it. We going way beyond that, because we're saying there's 50 different objects sitting behind that definition, and we're going to query it using the structure and connections that you tell us about the data. So that's a completely different approach to that, and a very different performance, what the system does. All right, do we take one?
I have a question for Vlad, if I may. If you go on mute while I ask the question.
Okay, so my question is,
can we expect to see tighter integration into Journey Builder, for example, be able to think of a decision split activity? We're able to go and query the data lakehouse in real time, rather than data extensions, or in addition to ingesting records in real time when an individual falls into a segment. Is this something we can expect to see in the future? Or?
I can't share that exact detail whether or not we're going to do exactly that. The way it sort of works today is you bring the data into Data Cloud, you make it smart and intelligent, and you recognize people behind that, you build your segments and you activate them, and the payload goes into Marketing Cloud in a certain way. It does flow for Marketing Cloud it's different from what we do with other activation channels and options. And we're certainly looking into much integration where, as Elliot said, we want to be able to provide the data access. And I honestly tend to think about that as almost the is, because technically that's where, in my opinion, that the whole direction of Data Cloud should be. But I'm not the project manager, and therefore a product owner. So it's going to go. But I do know that we look into the opportunity to provide better insight and access to the data that is within the Data Cloud. It certainly is not there today in a way that we would like to do. And in some cases, this is why I mentioned before, when you orchestrating the entire experience into, taking the data from marketing platform, sending it into the data platform, and then activating it back, you still potentially need to do some steps in the Marketing Cloud space in order to construct additional relational data points that you can use for personalization decisions within the journeys and so forth. And therefore, today, it makes sense. The way the product evolves with everything becoming more real time, everything is more connected. I think the time will tell us, because the connection between how much it's going to cost the customers to do that, because it is quite a pricey sort of experience for us to run these in the real time, and being able to surface the data and expose it in real time at that volume. Potentially it could be a feature that will be or so, but yeah, we yet to see.
Question, Elliot. Yep.
I've got a question, possibly for Elliot, Vlad, and Arthur. A lot of the clients we work with today treat Salesforce CRM, so Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, as their source of truth for data. At what point would you suggest for customers to be ingesting data directly to Sales Service Cloud versus ingesting data directly into Data Cloud? And if your answer is it depends, what sort of discovery questions might you be asking to determine the answer to that?
That's a hard question to ask. Do you want to give it a try?
I think obviously we need to make what's customer data and what's other type of data. So I see still the CRM as being your customer data cloud has the customer data plus everything else. Whether get rid of the CRM now and just use Data Cloud is your sole source of truth for your customer data as well. it's probably still a way to go in order to, to unify these systems and just pick one out of the ecosystem.
Do you want to answer?
Oh, I have questions.
Oh, questions, sorry. I mean, Arthur, maybe.
Not really, no.
All right. Well, you don't mind me then trying to give you a bit of an opinion on that. I wish Elliot used one of the marketing slides that we demonstrate right now on all the events and stuff, the architecture of the data cloud, right? If you remember Dreamforce, if you remember some of the more recent events, you will most likely remember there's like a bunny, which is genie, right, representing data. And we've got these 5 pillars that talk about, automation. We talk about 2 transactional or 2 databases. One of them was transactional, and the other one is the high volume, high storage sort of thing for data cloud. I feel this is where the answer lies really to that question, mainly because we haven't rip and replace the CRM or platform data store. It's still there. So if you think about the life cycle, if you think about the orchestration of the business activities, there's a lot that sits behind just storing the data in the platform versus storing it in a database of a kind. Or I don't see any question in the sense of why would you change the storage and the way that system the data flows within the system. Think of another sort of point is data cloud doesn't provide immutable ID, so it doesn't federate ID. This is one of the key factors where if you think about the lifecycle design of the data, think about, when we create a touch point with a customer, it doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's transactional or individual data else. There needs to be a system of truth that sort of categorizes and attaches an ID to that specific payload. And data system today, we haven't designed it to be that way, and that's one of the common questions where people ask us, like, what is it the replacement for an MDM or must solution? It's not. It does work together well. It does provide additional functionality on top of what the traditional MDMs would do, enhancing that, and provides ability for an enterprise to open up completely different approach to almost like democratize the data within the enterprise. Federate that. So therefore, you still need a system of truth in the sense of first touch point. I'd probably stay away from the notion of the origin of data, like the system of origin. You need to assign that ID. And then you start thinking of what makes sense to bring into the data cloud, because the fact that it sort of can consume a huge volume of data doesn't mean that we don't apply the same notion that we talk about marketing. If you can bring everything, it doesn't mean you need to, because it doesn't make sense. There's a whole lot of interest with regards to, like, well, how do you data in the platform? How do you make sense of that? And it's a very heavy discovery and, I guess, consulting engagement, because you understand the nature of the data when you bring it in. So if you split the functionality of the data platform in 2, everything happens when you bring it and you model it and you harmonize and unify it. That's very technically heavy, and you do need to have intimate knowledge of data that you bring into the platform in order for, I guess, designing and orchestrating it in a way that the end user can consume it in a nice way. And there's that end user consumption. And work with the same terminology, same attribute names, the same model, that common model layer that helps you to learn it with ease. You don't even know where the data is coming from because you don't really care. So separating these 2, you would go, well, it's really sort of difficult to build up these pieces on the left hand, the entry point. And if you think about doing consulting engagement, if you're in the partner, if you are a customer with 65 systems in the enterprise, connect all of them, geez, that's easily 2-year worth of engagement time, because you have to go and talk to every single BA or product owner and figure out the data all out and qualify that and all the other stuff that happens. So it's a pretty hefty engagement. Therefore, again, to me, the cloud and the power of that is it opens up the ability to work with data in enterprise, but the data that you really want to work with. It doesn't mean it's going to replace the warehouse. And as I said before, it doesn't replace the identity federation services. It doesn't replace a few other things. It really enhances that stuff. And I think the other good benefit was when we were at Dreamforce, I was having a conversation with one of the financial services customers. They've got across the globe, and they were kind of trying to figure out where's the space for the data cloud. And we had a session for about 2 hours, and we discussed a few different things, and he realized the potential for them is with all the existing systems of record and the rules and around them, it actually was ability to unify the data sources, almost going outside of governance models. So think about like there's systems that you store in like Health Cloud, Financial Services Cloud, you've got Sales and Service Cloud, right? They have a very different criteria for record quality, of access. There's a lot of different things that sort of from the business perspective sit and govern that whole structure. Then there's a marketing system, and probably 4 or 5 of them, commerce potentially, and you've got other system of records like ERP and all the other stuff. Now, if you want to unify that in traditional enterprise yourself, if you want to just do like a DM, that's a very lengthy process, and you kind of have to go through all the rules, align them together. Now with Data Cloud, you kind of skip a lot of these, and you get to the point where you can just take the data that sits in the system, bring it into another system, straight away use it. So like after you've done the modeling and stuff. So all of a sudden you combine the data that is very heavily governed by rules in terms of how you collect and store and process that. And then you've got a system that is less, still marrying them up together and make use of it. And to me, this is the biggest power in the sense of how do you open it up for the end user and the enterprise to use that. So there, it's an extra angle to think through and to say, well, if the platform doesn't really replace all of the systems, why would we expect it to be a replacement for the CRM? Long question, long answer, I'm sorry, but hopefully it sort of makes a bit more sense.
Did you get your question?
Localizing the storage of data sitting under the data, not CDP data cloud, is localized as an example for like Australian clients, it will be Australia, and for American clients, America. Good question. Just in case if you didn't hear it on the call, so the data residency for data that sits within the data cloud. And we do have currently a few places, but before, the whole principle of Data Cloud was we build it on the Hyperforce first. So if you heard about the term the Hyperforce, it pretty much says a public cloud infrastructure, and we design the tool to be not in-house within Salesforce infrastructure from the day one. Currently 2 instances available right now that in US and in Europe that you can host the data. Everything else, there's a roadmap to make these instances available. I can't commit to any timeline. I want to voice them. It's just mainly because there are certain dependencies with the geos and regions, and I honestly, I'm just not sort of into that when the exact timeline for that. I know specifically for Australia, we have a very short-term milestone to reach. It was pretty much the entire stack. So once we get instance in the region, then effectively every single product can be hosted on that. So once we get the Hyperforce instance for Australian market, then pretty much you can choose Marketing Cloud and everything else into that. So it's coming. It's just more the timing around that's just a bit uncertain. That's all.
A little bit of a binary question here. Azure.
Not the connector today, but it will be coming. It's on the roadmap for sure. Yeah.
Some of these questions. I think we've covered off everything. There are in Melbourne. Are there any more questions in the room?
I definitely have more questions.
Coming up. As we mentioned, we've got March and April. We're just going to keep doing CDP until it's all. So, yeah. I've got a request for the people like you all to get up against this wall and take a photograph of everyone here. That's just an awesome photograph opportunity. In terms of, we've got contests for the people online. You've come up with some awesome tips. We'll announce the winners of that separate. People get the ebooks. I think we'll do our winners separately in Melbourne too. In Sydney, you do your winners as well. But there'll be 6 O'Reilly ebooks. I think you're very kind sponsors, O'Reilly Media, for those ebooks. Thank you very much. We'll organise the name, email addresses, obviously, and we do want to take some photographs. Please enjoy mingling, and we do want to share them on social. Have your photo taken, and you don't want it taken, please hop out of the screen so you don't get taken. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And isn't it great? Like we've got together for a Marketing Cloud event. We kicked it off 2023. It's fantastic.
So Matt, yeah. Matt, I'd just like to say a few words in closing as well. Firstly, I want a big thank you to Matt Cameron and Jeffrey Chung for making this event possible tonight. So yeah, thank you both of you. Also, we've got some other, a couple of other Data Cloud events coming up. Haven't we, Matt? In March and April, they're yet to be announced. So, yes, say anything about those?
Arthur in March 22. So have we got confirmation about IBM as our host?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. It'll be announced very soon. This will be a hybrid event out of Melbourne. We've got April 6. At the moment, that'll be an online event. We've got speakers lined up for that. We've actually got a whole series of topics. So if you want to help present, please come out and we'll get you on the list to present. But topics coming up, as always, we'll have our monthly soft skills, getting started with Marketing Cloud. We'll keep running those events every month. And after we've done Marketing CDP, we're building apps for Marketing Cloud. So that's sort of our next 6 months, how I feel it is. We try and meet as often as we need to. If anyone wants to present, please reach out and we'll get it organised. If you've got a good idea of whatever, we don't have to stick to monthlies or weeklies or fortnightlies. We can always organise an event. So if you've got something you want, reach out and let's get it happening.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us online. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.